It is the pink elephant theory. If the guest wants a pink elephant, get them a pink elephant. If you can't find a pink elephant, get a horse, paint it pink, convince the guest it's an elephant. Do whatever it takes to ensure they're happy. That's it. Are they happy?
Welcome back to the Pink Elephant in the Room. I am Chris Adams. Today, I'm excited because one, I love them, but two, I have no idea what's going to happen over the next 45 minutes or so. The one and only Filthy Dan is with us. What's up, man? How are you?
Chris Adams, lovely to see you, mate. So nice to see you. I always feel like we don't get enough time together. So such a pleasure to get to connect with you for the next however long.
You know, for those that are joining, they're like, who the hell is Filthy Dan, and why is he saved in your phone as Filthy Dan? Mr. Stinger, more appropriately and politely, but do us a favor, tell everyone why Filthy Dan.
Well, I hope they call me Filthy Daniel because I started Filthy Food. Otherwise, that would be super weird, right?
Really awkward otherwise.
Yeah, super. Oh God, there's Filthy Daniel. Yeah, so basically, I started a company called Filthy, which makes mixers and garnishes for bars, restaurants, and hotels. And the name sort of Filthy Food came from the fact that my brother is my partner in Filthy, was my partner, and he's only 10 months younger than me. And in England, you know, it's always raining. It's sort of pissing down all the time. And we as little kids was always play outside and get covered in mud. And my mum would always be like, look at you, you're bloody filthy. We're just about to go out. You're bloody filthy. You're always so bloody filthy. So that's the way we look at everything, you know, just go all in and fully commit, get filthy in everything because that's where the joy is. So, you know, when I started the business, we didn't know anybody and nobody really knew us. And it started out.
How things have changed.
Well, you put beautiful things into the world, and you know, hopefully the right people notice, you know, and so then it was like, oh, that's Daniel from Filthy, and then it just became Filthy Daniel. Oh, there's Filthy Daniel. There's Filthy Daniel. So that's now on my business card.
I love it. And you know, the crazy part is when I hear that, I've known you for a little while now.
Yeah.
And to see it go from, you know, in your mind, you went into this, no one knew you, you just had a dream and you were wanting to put out something amazing. And now I walk into Costco, I walk into every grocery store and I see your amazing products all over the place. And I'm like,
thanks, mate.
In your mind, no one knew you yet. Now everyone knows your products and who you are. It's awesome, man.
It's been such a journey, you know. First of all, I have to say that's really America, you know. For those of you that are just listening audioly, you can tell I'm not from here originally. You know, I grew up in England, and which is this amazing wet little island the size of Michigan, you know. And but it feels like the biggest place in the world until you start to travel. And I would always come here to the States, and just a massive believer in the American dream, really, that you can come here and you can work hard, you could do what you say you're going to do. And over a long period of time, if you do the right thing and always show up, that people notice and they'll tell their friends about you. And that's really what happened. You know, I came back to America with just 4 barrels of olives and built the business out the back of my wife's minivan, you know, for 3 years. And my brother was going around New York with a backpack going from bar to bar. And great bartenders really told their friends. And we were able to build a business that really sustained because of the bartending community just being so brilliant, like just so kind to us. And then in return, we just always didn't take any relationship for granted. If somebody needed olives at 2:00 in the morning, we would drop them over there. And from that, just total word of mouth over the last, what do they say? It takes 15 years to have an overnight success, right? So it's been right around 15 years now, mate. You know, so I think just we really take a huge amount of time on the product, and then whether people like my accent or my bald head or whether they've ever met me or anything like that, the product has to just stand by itself, and people really notice the difference. So yeah, I was able to build a business here, which has been amazing. Really amazing.
And it's cool because when you originally started, you guys, it was focused on olives, right? I mean,
yeah, it was
travel the world finding
Yeah.
the best olive. That was your mission.
Yeah. Basically, it was an interesting one. I'd come here. I'd built a business first of all, and sold it. And my brother was in Iraq. He was a documentarian for part of a force recon unit. So he was part of a seven man team, kicking doors in for a couple of years, keeping us all safe. And he came back here to Miami, which is where I'm based. And we were sitting in my car, and he was obviously transitioning from being on the front line. And I'd sold this business, and I pitched him the idea for Filthy. I was going into bars. I love bars. I love bartenders. In England they put gin in our baby bottles, right? So you've been sort of smashing martinis from a tiny age, and just. And I was going in there, and there was this huge renaissance happening, which you were very much a part of, pioneering, and just great people that wanted to give guests better experiences. And we were all sort of our industry was transitioning at the time from, is this a legitimate profession for a lot of bartenders, And then suddenly it really was, and people were becoming ambassadors, and there was this whole thing happening where cocktail was having a huge renaissance. But olives were always terrible. I mean, they were like big gallons. The reality is they were packaged for kitchens. They were very oily. They were just really, really shitty. And we saw all of this beautiful stuff happening in the broad strokes. Service was getting better. Cocktail ingredients were getting better. People were using fresh ingredients, fresh juices, fresh herbs. Glassware was improving. It was taking longer to make cocktails. They weren't being thrown together. And then in the corner of the bar was this gallon of like rancid olives. And there wasn't an alternative, right? There just wasn't anything better. And I just couldn't. I was just watching that time and time again as I went into bars, and dessert cherries were being used in drinks, and people were really taking pride in what they were doing, right? So Marc came back from Iraq. We're sitting in my car, and I sort of pitched him the idea for Filthy, and he said, I've jumped out of airplanes 2,000 times. I've been in Iraq and Afghanistan for the last 2 years. You want to start a cocktail garnish company? This is
Makes
2000.
total sense.
Yeah, perfect sense.
That's the perfect transition.
Yeah, especially in 2006, right? It wasn't like there was a huge focus on cocktails at this point, unless you were really at the sharp end of the stick. So yeah, he said, okay, well, I thought I was crazy. Let's do it. So we thought it was going to take us 3 or 4 months to look at olives. There are 700 varieties of olives on the planet. He and I spent the next 2 years really just meeting great families, going to different regions, and exploring ultimately what became over 230 varieties of olives. And what it really came down to is that he and I grew up in each other's pockets, right? So we're only 10 months apart in age. And so we loved each other because we were brothers, but did we really like each other as adults? Like sometimes you don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like you reach a certain stage, especially in all families, right? Where it's like, I love you because you're my brother, and in our case. And then there was twins 2.5 years later, right? So there was 4 of us, really close in age. And it was like, but do we really like each other? Do we have anything in common as adults? He was a very single pursuit human being, and I was a very team sport human. So we're just sort of really different. And we were like, let's go and look at olives together. Let's see. And that 3 or 4 months just turned into 2 years, and we actually earned so much respect for each other, and it sort of enhanced the fact that yes, we do love each other, and yes, we do like each other, but ultimately that we could actually build something together, that his strengths were perhaps my weaknesses, and areas that I had some strength in, he didn't particularly want to focus on. So ultimately he breathed into the business anything that happened inside the building, and I breathed out at that point. So meeting people, trying to understand the landscape, trying to find the right partners to distribute our products, trying to build relationships. And in the first 3 years of building any business, anything that could kill you is probably going to, and we made it through. So I'm very grateful for those early days, delivering out the back of my car and having him next to me.
Yeah, and it's so funny when I think about the process of owning a company and building a brand. you know, I said a million times, everybody looks at where you're at, you know, the
Yeah.
end result, you know, and no one understands that process, the
Yeah.
journey, and how for you, you know, I don't have a business partner, right? It
Mm.
was,
Mm.
which is good and bad, right? It's
Yeah.
good sometimes because I didn't have to deal with someone else and trying to figure out that.
Yeah.
Bad on the other side because you feel sometimes, and I would assume you felt the same way at times, that it's no one understands that process of where you're at. No one's in your head understanding your vision, the dream, you know, where you're trying to go, the strategy you're trying to put in place. They just see you like, dude, just go get a job, bro. Like you
Yeah.
worked for
Yeah.
Ritz
Yeah.
Carlton for all these years, you were successful in that. Why are you doing this? Like, what's
Yeah.
you were on such an amazing path. Like, what's your reasoning? You're crazy, and almost a lonely,
It's
um,
very lonely, incredibly
right? And
lonely.
it almost
Yeah. Yeah.
discouraging at times because it goes from people telling you, oh my God, go after your dreams to like, what are you
Mm.
doing? Like, this makes no
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
So to have somebody that was standing next to you going through that at the same time, in the same, not just the same ministry, you know, you were on the business license together.
Yeah.
There had to be moments where having that support and having somebody alongside you had to be beneficial as well, though, right?
Yeah, very much so. First of all, like over time, you want to sort of clear out all the people that are saying, "What are you doing?" Right? Because ultimately, we all have to surround ourselves with people that are rooting for us, and even if they don't, even if they don't fully understand it, they just got to love and respect that this is the choice you're making because you're a grown up, and by them challenging the ideal, maybe it just comes from a place of love, right? They really care about you, but ultimately, you have to remove those voices because I always felt like a time traveler, like I'd seen the future, I'd been
Mhm.
there, I know what's going to happen, I'm telling you. And now I've sort of come back to this time and I'm saying, okay, everybody, I know what it looks like. Filth is going to be in these great bars and restaurants, and don't worry. I think having a partner to a certain extent, sometimes it's just nice to open an envelope that has a bill in it standing next to somebody, and you're going, how are we gonna
Yeah.
pay this? So, but I think at the same time, and like I said, my brother's a very unique human being. He's an incredible human being. He's also a single pursuit human being. So 3 years ago, he sort of came to me and said, look, I've been sitting behind a desk for a while now. I've been building a boat. I'm going to sail around the world by myself. So can you sort of sell my stock? So in a way, life is also quite chaptorial. Even with partnerships, you hope you go into things, whether it's a personal relationship or a business relationship, where you're going to be ride or die forever. And then sometimes people evolve in different ways. And as long as it's always healthy and respectful, for me, building a global brand was always my Everest, right? Where my brother, he wants to climb Everest. It's a totally different thing. So there's no point um, going anybody outstaying their own personal welcome, not for anybody else, but for themselves. And then otherwise they just don't find joy in it anymore. And I think life is tough enough. So you have to find joy in all of it. And it's really hard if you're around people that don't find joy in it anymore or want to do other things. And then it's like, if you love them, that expression, if you love them, you'll let them go. And also some of the other thing you said, look, heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? You're right. It is lonely to bear the responsibility, especially when you start to have lots of people that work for you and rely on you and are looking for you to set the vision and always be one step ahead, so you can give clarity and confidence to them to say, don't worry. But I think as long as you lead with humility and kindness ultimately, and are open with people, then it's working here. That was the other thing. Like, could we really build a massive business without being dicks? Right? That's really what it comes down to. Doing it
It's
with love
amazing
first,
how,
you know?
yeah, it's amazing how much. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking to me about where the business is now and where it's going versus when on day one when I had this dream of what it's going to be, and how different is it now versus what it was 10 years ago.
Mm.
And I'm like, it is, it's very different. I didn't think we would be going in this direction as a brand now like I did 10 years ago. I said, but the one thing that has stayed true and consistent is the foundation and core of who I was and who I wanted to be, what I wanted to affect hasn't changed, right? Like I deeply care about others and their success. I want to see people win. Then that includes my own team. Like I want them to win. I love giving. It's in my DNA. That's never changed. Now, the evolution of our brand and different directions we've gone and things that we do, that's changed and evolved. And I didn't expect some of the things to happen, but the ethos of who I was as a person has always been kind of my true north, my North Star in the process. And it's almost like that's the question you go back to ask yourself before you make that decision is, am I still doing the core of what I set out to do? And it's never changed with revenue or money or who. That's still my foundation, and my decision making is built on that. And I think that's an important thing when people ask me, I'm going into a business, how do I do it, or what's the next steps? And I think making sure you understand who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, that needs to be, you need to know that, like down deep. And it can't,
Definitely.
the minute that you change that and you kind of change who you are as a person based on a bigger check or a different contract, be careful. That's a slippery slope.
What did Public Enemy, don't believe the hype, right? I mean, like at the end of the day, you're the same guy I met 10 years ago, exactly the same guy. And I hope you think that I am, right? I think that's the thing. Self-awareness is ultimately the key. So and also, why are you doing this? I always do things to do them. I never do things to get something else, and I think that's really ultimately what it comes down to. We all want to look, everybody that works at Filthy, we all have a chip on our shoulder for whatever reason, that it was developed there. And I love that. I love that because there's that drive and that energy, whether it's to prove something to somebody that didn't think you would make anything of yourselves, or whether they were fired from a job at one stage in their careers, or whatever it is. There's that energy that says, I want to make a difference and I want to win. I want to work hard, but it's do the right thing, whatever the cost, right? That's the thing. It's not do the right thing as long as it suits me to do the right thing, or do the right thing as long as it doesn't impact me personally. It's do the right thing, whatever the cost. And I think that's the ethos and the culture here. Inevitably, when you build a business as an entrepreneur like you are, and like I am, pain is inevitable, right? So really what it comes down to is your own ability to, your own personal pain threshold, and then the pain threshold of the people that love you. Like when I started Filthy, I had my wife, I had 2 children that were very young. We had one on the way, and I think ultimately in this, as bigger a partner as my brother was in those early years, and us being able to sort of look at each other and trust the other one was working really hard, could absolutely in no way, shape or form be the person that was so dedicated to build a business if my wife wasn't completely committed to loving me and to the kids and to being a really true life partner. I think sometimes that's not really spoken about a lot, the person that's standing next to you, because it's not just your ability to withstand pain, because ultimately we're a bit like nuts, right? We have to be like, it doesn't matter, we're just going to keep doing it, we're going to keep doing it, we're going to keep doing it. But then you look across and your kids have got the worst sneakers on, or the shorts that are falling off, or whatever it is, and your wife is still looking at you like, you got this. That is so massive. It's so massive, right? Because you have to be brave beyond you. You have to feel strength from that. And I think, most people with those sort of responsibilities in the early stages, it makes them feel less, more risk averse. And for me, it was the complete opposite. I got so much strength from that little unit, and feeling like, it's okay, Dan, you can do this. We were delivering out of the back of Kim's car for 3 years. She would drop the kids at school, come back, I'd take all the seats out of the back, I'd fill it with boxes out of the garage, make my deliveries, come back home, put the seats back in, she'd pick them up from school, take the seats back out, and then make deliveries at night. You can't do any of that without the person standing next to you going, I love you anyway. I got you. We got this. And it's so massive. Honestly, for me in my journey, I talk about America being an incredible partner for me and giving me the sort of strength and opportunity. And my brother in those early years, just, being on my six and us like getting out there and like challenging each other to just kind of build a business and having each other's backs. And ultimately my wife and the kids just give me a huge amount of strength to be able to carry on days where I felt weaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know?
I think that a lot of times when you're going through this, when you're building a brand, and I think one thing I'll point out is having an ethos and knowing who you are doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes, right?
Oh God, yeah.
That's okay, right? That's okay. Failing doesn't make you a failure, and making
No.
mistakes are okay. Knowing how to rebound from those mistakes, learning from the mistakes, be better moving forward. That's important. And I think the other part for me was on those days when it's not going right, those weeks, those months where you're like, I don't know how tomorrow's going to happen. Having my two kids that says, no, I'm going to get up again.
Yeah.
Because of them. Right.
Yeah.
And, like you, my kids were super young at the time. They didn't know. They got up every day and went to school, and life is life.
Yeah.
Yet me, that was part of that push and that motivation, and to help me push on and continue on those days when you didn't feel like doing it, when it didn't feel like it was gonna work, but you still had to have something inside that was pushing you forward. The kids were that, and then as for my journey, it was then as time went on, then Maricela came into my life, right? And then finding that person that helped push me to the next level of where I was going, personally and professionally, right? It was business was doing this, but she helped me figure out how to take the business to the next level. But then that also personally helped me become the person that I really wanted to be, but wasn't there yet. Right. I knew inside who I was supposed to be as a human being. And I wanted to be that person, but I wasn't that person. And having somebody come in to help me find that, it was an interesting process for me, for sure. One thing I want to ask you.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting subject, and it kind of goes with where we're at right now. Do you find that when you first started this, a lot of people, they want to see you, they're in your corner, right? This is, chase your dreams, right? You hear people say that, and man, we're so proud to see you do this. And it's almost like patting you on the head. Like, we don't know if you're going to make it, but yeah, this is great, buddy. Go out there and try to make something of yourself, right? Do you find that the more success you find, there's more people that want to see you fail?
I think if there are, I don't, I've luckily through support system, through, not showing up everywhere all the time now. I'm less surrounded by people. Look, inevitably, there are always going to be people that don't want to see you be successful. And then you've got to determine, or I've determined, everything is fuel for me. So I think I've been looking at this very, very closely. I've been exploring my own personal happiness, right? Which I think is being happy is almost like a bit of a rainbow, right? The light has to hit the water with the sunlight and refract in a certain way, and all these things come to, and that creates happiness, right? But I know I can't rely on happiness. What I have to do is be incredibly positive. So if I look at a battery with a negative, the stronger the negative, the stronger the positive. For me, I always skew positive. So the more shit, the more people like I said, that maybe send you shade or, smile at you and then talk shit about you behind your back or whatever it is. I feel it, but I use it. Like for me, it's all about positivity, right? Honestly, I don't spend any time in the negative because I feel like I'm a human being with a finite amount of energy and I can only do so much. So why waste it? And I say this to my kids: shit in, shit out. If you're consuming just all of this crap all the time, like, what do you expect to be able to produce, right?
Yeah.
So I am quite now. Enemies are energizing. I'm a big believer in that, right? It's not all like everybody's like holding hands in a circle. I want to win, right? So inevitably competition is great. People that are not rooting for you, it's great. Whatever fuels you, use it. Use it.
Yeah.
As long as you then use it to push yourself forward and continue to shine and try to make good things happen. That's really what it comes down to. That's for
Yeah.
me. But yeah, I mean, in England, it's like I said, it's a tiny little island, and people are much more optimistic here and much more celebratory of the successes and the wins. Where there it is a little bit of an island mentality. I found, at least in my experience through it, very dyslexic kid, didn't do particularly well in school, all of those types of things. There are people sometimes that that inevitably don't want to see success, but I don't really find that as much here, at least not to my face.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because we push big time at EAG. I talk a lot about perspective, and you have a choice, one or two ways to think about something, and that's completely up to you. Choosing to look positive versus the negative in each situation. That all it is you're gonna think one way or the other. All it is a choice of how you choose to view it, which then dictates your emotions, and our emotions then drive our behavior. Right? All those things happen based on how our mind processes things.
Exactly.
And
And
our
how are
ability
you going to build a global brand? How are you going to build a global brand if you're focusing any energy on being a negative human being? How are you going to build a national brand? How are you going to build a regional brand? How are you going to do something cool locally if you're just tearing other people down or not feeling good about stuff? You're just not. So you have to make a choice, right?
That's it. It's funny. I don't even know if you realize this. So, we teach, my dad was a psychologist, and our brand is really built on understanding the brain and how the brain affects behavior of our guests, our teams, and whatnot. Right. So you and I were together in Miami, and we were at a bar, and we do this workshop
Shocker.
called the
That's
Psychology.
hold
I
on.
know.
Hold on. Did you say we were at a bar?
Yeah, so you'll probably
What
remember
a
this because it
shocker.
didn't happen often. We teach this thing called psychology of hospitality, and I had done it for a few years, and it had done really well in a lot of our luxury brands. And this was when I feel the transition was happening, because now you hear this word everywhere. Everybody's talking storytelling. Are you storytelling? Right? I mean, I hear that constantly. It's overused. People don't really understand what storytelling is, especially when we talk about food and beverage and developing concepts and all. But this is really at the precipice of when it was coming to light. And you and I were sitting at a bar, and we were talking, and you told me, you talked to me about a story of something you had read. And I went and did my own homework and research on this. And now it is a huge piece of our psychology of hospitality. And I don't know if you remember, we were talking about significant objects. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do. Significant versus insignificant, and the story that's attached to them can give them much greater value. I do remember that. I'm trying to remember the journalist that wrote that.
The guy that was doing a garage sale.
That's
Yeah,
right.
he was doing a
Yeah,
garage
I love that
sale.
story. Yeah, I love that story.
Somebody was
That
wanting to
idea.
throw something away, and he was like, wait a minute, why are you throwing that away? And the guy's like, dude, it's a broken coffee mug. It serves no purpose. And he said in that moment, he realized that broken coffee mug had no value to his friend, but to him, because of the story attached to that mug, who gave it to him at what time, it had enormous value. And then he went out, bought a bunch of tchotchkes, spent a few $100. You're right. And you were the catalyst that told me about that I went and did homework on it, and now it is a huge piece of our psychology class of helping people understand the value of their story. And we talk about it in two ways, right? So on one hand, when we teach this, I talk about how your ability to tell a great story, whether it's a product you're selling or a concept you have or a hotel, whatever, that story is important, and it adds value. But then I also talk about your ability to understand your story. and how, regardless of how you were raised, the good, the bad, the indifferent, your story gives you value, and it helps you
Yes.
understand your worth. And it doesn't matter if you were raised with a silver spoon in your mouth, or you were raised with absolutely nothing. That story you have gives you value, and it helps develop who you are and your character when you go to talk to others. And I attribute the success of that class and that workshop because you and I, sitting in a bar, you told me this deep, amazing story that then became
Yeah.
a huge part of
Oh,
what
how
we teach.
wonderful. Yeah, that's so, thank you for reminding me of that story, because I found it very impactful when I first read it and became aware of it. I'm trying to remember the journalist's name. I'll have to go back and relook at it, but just the idea of something having a real value once you create an emotional connection with people around it. And I think, to your point, storytelling and telling the story, and all these made up stories around certain things, for people to market certain things in a way. Ultimately, over a long enough period of time, I've been doing Filthy for 15 years. People can feel it. But what I do think, and what I think would be valuable to anybody listening, would be trying to find a way to communicate the story in an efficient way so that people can tell their friends. That's the thing. Sometimes people talk about a story in a really big way, or they go all over the place, and then when somebody's listened to it, they like little bits of it, but how are they going to tell it forward? And then how's that person going to tell it to their friend and their friend? So when it gets 8 friends away from when you told that original story, how close is it going to be to the story you told? And I think that's really the thing. And I'm not saying, if you have more time with people, you shouldn't, go into more detail and all of those things. But I think certainly for, trying to get people to, Filthy is a bartender's word of mouth brand. Right, it was totally word of mouth, and it ultimately was like, there's these 2 brothers. They looked at hundreds of varieties of olives. They naturally cure them. They don't use chemicals, and they built the business out the back of their car. You really like Daniel. You really like Marc. They're really good people. Check out their olives. And it was something, and that sort of evolved into this 2-2-2-4-4. Right, 2 brothers spent 2 years. They looked at over 200 varieties of olives. They spend 4 months naturally curing the olives, as opposed to 4 days with chemicals. 2 brothers, 2 years, over 200 varieties of olives, 4 months to naturally cure the olives, as opposed to 4 days with chemicals. And in a way, that story, over time with bartenders telling it on, and me hearing the way they were telling it, ultimately evolved into maybe a really efficient way of communicating it, so that you hope that story could go beyond you, because we're not all ultimately social media savvy, and we're not all out there doing stuff all the time. So how do you get your story to flow so people get to know what you're doing, if you think it will be of value to them?
Yeah, no, of course. And I think as you're building, and something I've watched you do, in fact, I was with you in your offices when you were looking at the new branding of Filthy. And I think it was beautiful, by the way. But I think it also speaks to the fact, when we talk about storytelling, when I think about building a brand and we get brought in to help, create these brands, is understanding that your story has to be told in many different ways, but it all has to tell the same story, right? So if you're walking into a restaurant, a bar, or a hotel, whatever you believe your story is, I always say, if I have to write the story out on the cover of a menu for people to read, for you to understand the story, then you don't have a good concept.
No,
right? The
that's
concept should be told with every single touch point, that without the server saying anything, they know your story. Right now, the server's just coming in to reaffirm, to give cool little details, to kick it up a notch, so to speak. But if I have to literally write out a story of what the concept is for somebody to understand my brand, then you don't really have a concept, right?
Absolutely.
Seen you over the years really dial in the details beyond. So, because when you started, it was driven on what you just said, right? It was the 2-2-2-4-4, and it was the amazing product that you had found that you believed was going to revolutionize an industry. Well, now that brand has evolved and you have many other products and you have a lot going on with your brand, but you've been able to, whether you realize it or not, and I think you're a very smart individual, so you know exactly what you were doing, but you made sure the details of everything that was going on still spoke to the story of who you are. So as
Yeah.
you develop other things that weren't the original olives, you still had a story you were telling and it all spoke together. And now your branding
Yeah.
and all these things start working beautifully together to create this massive, brand that you're now building.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. But I think you said it really articulately earlier, in the 10 years and then the people that influence you and just your own personal evolution is going to create an evolution for the things that are around you, whether it's your influence on your children, whether it's your brand, the people that work for you. We don't, there's this fixed mindset, and which is, you're never going to change, and then there's this other mindset which is sort of curious and open to the fact that you just don't know it all, and you're going to lead with humility. And I think everything for me goes back to
Yeah.
it's like we're going all in. It's not about dipping your toe in, it's about going all in, because that's where the joy is. So whether it's a conversation, whether it's a moment, whether it's working with an agency to look at evolving your packaging, whether it's sitting at a bar, whether it's standing up in front of hundreds of salespeople, whatever it ultimately is, I always think of it like three parts. It's the work you do before the meeting.
Mhm.
I believe in this thing called the 7 Ps, which is proper planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance, right? So I really plan very, very detailed. And then when I get there, I try to just be so present and so committed to it that I'm not thinking of other things at all. I'm like, I'm all in. I've jumped and I'm building my wings on the way down. Hopefully, because of the proper planning and preparation, those wings are going to help me fly. But I've hit the sidewalk a number of times, right?
Sure.
So I'm fully in. And then after the opportunity, after the experience, how did we all do? What didn't work? What didn't work? And then it sort of goes into this loop. So you're
Mhm.
you're preparing properly. Our job, I like, because I know you do it all the time. That's it, mate, isn't it? We prepare all the time, whether it's a new hotel you're opening, or a new market we're launching, or whatever it might be. We try to get our information. We try to go there ready and prepared. When we're there, we put every ounce of love and energy and commitment to that moment so that we can have as most impact. And I think that comes down to a total lack of entitlement. I don't feel in any way entitled to anybody's attention. I don't feel entitled to anybody's positivity. I have to earn completely every single second of it. And I can only do that if I'm fully there and they can feel my 100% commitment. And then afterwards, I go, wow, that really had an impact. Or that they never, this audience, I wasn't communicating in a way that they got it. And I thought it was going to land and it just didn't. So how do we evolve that back again when we start that loop of preparation again? So I think it's just about being fully committed all the way through. And then in that evaluation piece, you mentioned the branding. Our branding initially was for bartenders. Filth is a premium with attitude company, right? There's a lot of brands in the premium space of heritage brands that have multiple generations of people that have been committed to that brand and that story. And then there's rebellion, right? I know you've been doing it for 100 years, but as an entrepreneur, I'm a total juvenile delinquent, which means I like to break stuff and try to rebuild it again. So I respect your heritage business and I respect the way that you're doing it, but I'm going to rebel against that and create something. So Filthy being premium with attitude, the old branding had a lot of attitude in it, but it never
Mhm.
communicated the premium nature of what it is we were doing. It never
Yeah.
communicated any of those quality cues. So as you start to grow beyond the bars, hopefully into retail, into home consumers, where you're not going to have a chance to connect, or they're not going to care about the terroir of the olives or whatever it might be, the packaging has to live and communicate all of those things. And our packaging wasn't good enough. And then to your point, it's about putting the other people in the room where you can create a respectful platform or forum to really challenge and push each other around and in a respectful way to create beautiful work. And so I
Yeah.
love that narrative.
It's great, and you said something there. There's a quote that I love that says, "Change is inevitable. Growth is optional." And I think when you look at a brand, when you look at a person,
Yes.
when you're building a brand, your ability to be okay with change happening. When you create something, and it's funny because even going back to the days when I would be behind the bar, when you create a cocktail, when a chef creates a dish, when you're creating your olives, it becomes very personal for you, right?
Very,
It's when
very.
that chef creates a dish and somebody says they don't like it. I mean, you're ready to fight him because I created this, I birthed this, right? I
Yeah.
tried 38 different variations of it until I believe this is the perfect one, and now someone says it's not good. It's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
Your ability with a brand, you birthed this. Like, it is very personal for you. It is a child. It's something that you
Yeah.
take.
Very much so.
It hurts you when somebody says they don't like your brand, when they don't like something about your brand. It is something that it cuts deep.
You know
Your
what? Can I
ability,
just be really distinct about that, though? Really distinct
yeah,
about that, because I think there is a difference. If somebody says, I personally don't like it, I'm totally cool with that. I get it.
yeah,
If they say it's not good or it's shit, I take that very, very personally, because it says everything about them and nothing about my brand, right? In a way, there's hundreds of people that have reached the point where that thing's going out into the world. So you may not personally like it. And we live in an amazing place where people get to have those opinions. I
that's
have
it.
to respect your opinion. I may not agree with it. I respect your opinion. You don't like it. I totally get it. If you say it's shit, then absolutely we're fighting in the parking lot. Totally
It's
different, right?
yeah,
Totally different. Totally
it's so
different.
true because I say this when we're doing classes and somebody's trading cocktails or something. I had to realize really quick that someone's palate, that's their palate. There's no right or
Totally.
wrong. If you make somebody something
Totally.
and they go, I just don't like
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
that's
Get
okay,
it.
right?
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
12
Yeah.
people that love one person that doesn't. That's their palate. Life goes on, right? So I think it's so true what you just said.
Sorry,
That
mate.
is the difference between someone that their opinion of they like or don't like something versus now, okay, you don't like me, and now this is
Yeah.
you're just coming
Exactly.
after me. It has nothing to
And then
do with
also, exactly. And then also, what is that? Okay. What did that opinion that you just had that said you didn't like it cost you? Okay. Did it cost you? If you take a position on something, I'm going to stand for this. What did it cost you? Did it cost you your friends? Did it cost you your job? Did it cost you any money? No, it didn't cost you any of those things. So therefore, it has no value. So why should I put any value on it? I respect it, but I don't have to put any value on it. Okay, you don't like it. Okay, no problem. Go with love. Find something you like. Do you know what I mean? That's totally cool. But if you take a position which is it's this, then I have to go, what do you base that on? Oh, well, actually, I'm really just friends with the guy that has the other company that's your competitor. Oh, okay. Okay, I get it. So it's not that you
yeah,
don't like it. You just love or you think it's bad. You just happen to love your friend. Totally got it. But a
yeah,
lot of times people are just so, like I said, like language is very powerful, right? But at the same time, I have to say, what did it really cost you to have that opinion? Actually, it just cost you nothing. You read an article, you got enough information to regurgitate somebody else's opinion. Suddenly, you're gonna take that opinion as your own. But are you going to die on that hill
yeah,
fighting for that opinion? Actually, you're not really, because it's just a flippant thing. Okay, it's all cool. It's like I said, at the end of the day, it's we when you go at home and you look in the mirror before you go to bed, you go, yeah, I had a good day. There's lots of people that work here. We're responsible for lots of people's families. We're trying to do the right thing every day. We're supporting the growers that are harvesting all the fruit naturally, and all of these types of things. And it's like, okay, mate, you don't like the stuff, or you're going to have some comment that's a little bit inappropriate about filthy, or why is it called filthy? That I get that a lot. Oh, I'd never buy a product that's called filthy. Okay, don't buy it. Okay,
high
that's all
five.
right. All right, yeah. High five. Thank you for bringing a little bit of sunshine onto our comment section. A good job. It's like, whatever it is, it's like people are so eclectic and so different. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just try to
So
focus on.
now we're getting to the tail end of this, and I'm curious. You started with the olives, and not to put you on the spot here, but how
Yeah.
many? I assume you know the answer to this. How many different products do you guys have now?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one because I think of not just the core products, I think of the sizes and the packaging that we use, right? So,
Mhm.
when Charlie Hart, who's Filthy's COO, when he first came here, we had like 19 SKUs, and now we've got over 100, and it's only really because of packaging choices. Let's take the Bloody Mary mix as an example. It will come in a tiny little 4-ounce pouch for Delta Airlines, which says, on the back of it, "We met on a plane. Now take us
And
home."
just so you know, as a
I'll show
Delta,
you.
most of our team flies Delta.
Oh, cool.
Really, really appreciate the fact that you're on Delta now. So thank you very much
Yeah.
for that.
No. So that's the point. You could do one product like a Bloody Mary mix, and it could go all the way from this tiny little 4-ounce jar, right? 4-ounce pouch, all the way up to say, oh gosh, something like this, for the cruise ships. So I
Yeah.
think in a way, all in all, there's hundreds of SKUs. It's really around 12 core items, and it's just about giving people. Packaging is a massive thing, actually. Just to say that, especially if you're in a product industry like mine, we're really looking at packaging a huge amount at the moment, right? Because as I said, we like to break stuff. That's just innately within our business. Just because somebody's been doing it like that for 100 years, why do we do it like that? Or just because people have been using glass or plastic bottles for their Bloody Mary mix, do we have to do that? So I think that's a big part of it. I think packaging is really where the growth of the business has come. There's been a few extra items over the years. It takes a long time to put a new product into the world. You have to, for us, determine why are we doing it really, and does the world need another one of these things? Like Bloody Mary mix is a prime example. Margarita mix. Does the world need another Bloody Mary mix? There's hundreds of them. Well, actually, when you really look at it, the market's full of preservatives and additives and allergens and all different sorts of things. Or margarita mix. Tequila's on fire. Everybody loves tequila, and yet the mixes on the market, none of them were made with fresh lime juice, lime concentrate or ascorbic acid, which is synthetic vitamin C. So could we, if we're going to get into that space, do we want to have a fight because there's going to be a more competitive market? Mixers is more competitive, say, than olives. Yeah, actually, you know what? We're ready for that. As long as you know what you stand for, fresh ingredients, sustainable packaging, doing something that we think will give the bartender some more empowerment to give their guests a better experience, all good. It's never been about just launching products. But I am actually curious about maybe doing some collaborations or some seasonal stuff to just work with people that I like and do some cool stuff. So I think, we're not opposed to doing more products. It's just for what are the reasons we're actually doing it.
Hey, I think for all of us, the consumer, we love hearing that you're looking at doing more products. There's nothing that you put out that isn't phenomenal.
Thank you. Thanks, mate.
Quality. And so that's exciting to hear that you got more stuff. I know on the horizon. So I look forward to and promoting it for you, being one of your best sales.
Mate, so great to see you, man. Really, I can't wait for us to be able to get into the same city at some point and have a proper catch up. And thanks for inviting me on to sort of tell the story and just have a catch up. So lovely to see you, brother.
Hey, as we close out, how can people find you? Whether it's social media or.
Yeah, definitely. So the company, filthyfood.com, depending on where you guys want to shop, if you're a bar, restaurant or hotel, on premise or retail store, you probably want to find Filthy through your distributor. And we have great distribution through our liquor distributor partners around the country, like Southern Wine and Spirit and Breakthrough Beverage. So ask your local a spirit salesperson, do you guys carry Filthy? Hopefully they would have presented it to you already. But certainly retail stores and Amazon and ultimately at filthyfood.com. But reach out to me if anybody has any questions. Yes, this is my real email address. It's daniel@filthyfood.com. I will try to get back to you as quickly as I can. And thank you for being interested in what we're doing.
Man, thank you so much. I encourage everyone to follow along, buy the product, check it out. Not only is the product great, the guy that we've been talking to is literally one of the best people on the planet. And I'm very fortunate to be able to call you a friend as well. So thanks so much for being on.
See you, pal.
You have been listening to The Pink Elephant. I am Chris Adams. You can find us at www.ellisadamsgroup.com or myself at @ChrisAdams_EAG at Ellis Adams Official. Follow along on the ride as we take you around the world, doing what we can to help others. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.